Hello and welcome back to All Church Sunday School. My name is Shannon Moore.
I'm Renee Hoke.
You're Renee Hoke.
That's
How did I
right.
get that lucky?
I think we're all lucky. We're glad to have you, Shannon.
Well, it's good. This is week 2 of being in All Church Sunday School. We had a good time last week.
Yeah, we did have a good time. And we actually had our live Sunday school class on Sunday suggested our 2 Bible characters for today.
That's right. We're continuing to look at Peculiar Treasures, a book by Fredrick Buechner. The subtitle is A Biblical Who's Who. And he just writes these short little essay-type stories, not even essays, but more stories, retells the stories.
It's a carefully crafted story. You're going to hear the end of the Mary Magdalene story, and I just think he's so exact and creative in how it's not just an entry in a dictionary kind of writing. It's just lovely.
And he cares.
And I think about it so you and I, what have we been thinking about from last week?
The aluminum walkers, throwing down the aluminum walkers when we were talking about.
Grabbing your hiking boots.
Right. Those images stay.
Yes.
And so
that has been in my head ever since.
So the title of this book, Peculiar Treasures, comes from a passage from Exodus, God speaking to Moses about the Israelites. He says, you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you and I talked about how we were unfamiliar with that passage a little bit.
That's right. And it's lovely. It's a lovely God claiming the people.
Mm-hmm.
You will be my treasure. I mean, what is more amazing than God saying that to you?
And I love the word peculiar.
Mm-hmm.
Because it could have a negative connotation, but not when it's connected with the word treasure.
Yes.
It sounds unique.
If you're just peculiar, that's not a good thing.
Right.
But a peculiar treasure,
that means
it's something else entirely.
That of all of the treasured things, you have unique qualities.
That's right.
And I think that's how God sees all of us. So it's very interesting. I think Buechner pulls that out in all of these.
Both of our characters.
These stories.
Today.
So last week we talked about John the Baptist and Elijah. So we decided we were going to talk about women this week, and we asked the live Sunday school class if they had any suggestions, and they gave us 2. Who are they?
Naomi and Mary Magdalene.
Right. So Naomi is closely connected to another character named Ruth. And her story, both their stories are told in the book of Ruth in the Old Testament. So I'm doing that one.
Good.
And then
we'll talk about Mary
Magdalene. And
Mary Magdalene.
There's an interesting connection between the 2 that
you're going to tell us later.
Yeah, that I hadn't thought about before.
Excellent.
So let's take a look at Ruth and Naomi. Will you read what Buechner says about Ruth and Naomi, just at the beginning of his story here?
Ruth was a Moabite girl who married into a family of Israelite transplants living in Moab because there was a famine going on at home. When her young husband died, her mother-in-law, Naomi, decided to pull up stakes and head back for Israel where she belonged. She advised Ruth to stay put right there in Moab and try to snag herself another man from among her own people.
So I want to kind of look a little bit at the differences between the way Buechner tells this story and the way this story appears in the Bible, because Buechner is able to tell this entire story in 2.5 pages. And, the book of Ruth in the Bible isn't very long, but it's longer than 2.5 pages in a little book
more
this
details.
size. Yeah, and so he leaves some things out, but it works. And so, for example, in that little bit that you just read in the scripture, that's 9 verses to tell what Buechner described in just a few sentences. And I love that. He did leave some things out. The husbands' names, we don't need their names.
Because they're gone.
Anyway, right?
And she's got to snag a new one.
Right. And then, but there's another daughter-in-law that of Naomi that he doesn't mention. And her name is, do you know what it is?
No. I
Ah,
forgot.
you'll remember when I
Orpah.
say it. Yes.
I remembered.
And that's what who Oprah Winfrey was named after.
But isn't it spelled differently?
It is, but on her birth certificate, it's Orpah.
It's spelled.
And,
Oh, I didn't know that.
And the family, there was discussion about how it should be pronounced. So they just started calling her Oprah and changed the spelling. But on her birth certificate, it's Orpah.
Now, isn't
named
that an
after this
And
character.
who would have known that if they hadn't tuned in to All Church Sunday School?
Well, probably anybody who looked it up on the internet. But I don't know who else would have.
So this isn't a fact you've had with you for a while?
No, I have known that for a while.
you have?
But I did verify it before I came on just to make sure it was right in my head. So
You don't want to just be throwing things out to our
no.
our Sunday school
We're
class.
responsible journalists.
That's right.
So we've got Naomi, this widow, her daughters-in-law, who are also widowed. She just wants to go back home, back to Bethlehem, where her family is. There's no need for her to stay here
And imagine how vulnerable she is in a distant place
right.
with no sons to protect her, no husband to protect her.
And in
so
that time, you needed women sort of
Sure.
depended on men.
that's right. So it was a practical decision, I think.
Right.
I need to go back where I'm with my people.
And she didn't really, I get the feeling that she didn't really want them to go with her. I mean, I don't think it was.
Well, she's so distraught in the way that the scripture tells it. I mean, she's just all is lost. It's not a hopeful speech that she makes to her daughters-in-law, do you think?
No, it's
She's
like,
just
I have nothing
deeply
left.
grieving.
This is your opportunity to start
Yes.
over.
Like almost like Ruth's life is over, but it shouldn't be. Maybe encouraging them to start the next chapter for them. But she's done and she's going home.
Right. So I think sometimes we read this story with her sort of being, I don't know. I mean, I think she is distraught, but I think there's a feeling that she's being very kind to them or self-sacrificing. But as I've read it,
She just didn't want a
I
road
think
trip
she just
with
didn't
the
want
two of them.
I think she wanted to start over. I think she wanted this chapter of her life to be done and to
Because
go back home.
as long as she's with her widowed daughters-in-law, she's
Constant
reminded of the
reminder.
loss.
Constant reminder. And I think she just wanted a fresh start. So let's, we can see here, I've got down how Buechner described Naomi as a strong-willed old party.
That's an interesting word. Old party.
Old party. And then he says that she said to them, if by some gynecological fluke I could marry and have another son, by the time he was old enough to marry, you'd be old too.
This is just practical.
Right. So there's a picture that Orlu Lager, our artist, our art finder, found for us, and it's a very traditional picture by George Daw, and you can see Naomi with both of these daughters-in-law. It's this one. I think it was on the page before. You
I'll
can
find it.
see her, very English.
Yes. Sort of like from a Jane Austen novel.
Yes, done in 1804. English, very contemporary for that time. But you can see even in that picture, there's anguish, and there as there so often is in goodbyes, and one of them is clinging to her, and one of them is turning the other way. So in the Bible story, 3 times Naomi tells the daughters to turn back or go back, and they wept aloud. And then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and said goodbye.
You can tell she's resigned herself to go on her own.
Yep.
The way her body is moved aside.
She's turning back. So will you read what Ruth said to Naomi?
Where you go, I go. Where you live, I live. And if your God is Yahweh, then my God is Yahweh too. Famous words.
Famous words.
Used in weddings.
Right, which is kind of weird.
It is kind of weird when we know the origin. But beautiful words. Very devoted.
You ever played that at a wedding? Or sung it at a wedding?
No. I don't know. I don't think I know the.
Whither thou goest, I will go. You don't know that song?
I don't think I know that tune.
Oh.
Do you want to sing it to
I
us now?
don't.
Come on, Shannon.
But I bet a lot of our the folks who are attending All Church Sunday School know that song. Maybe they even had it at their wedding. It was very popular at a
Very
time.
popular.
Yep. All right, so then Buechner continues on with his story of Ruth and Naomi. Will you read how he describes when they arrive back in Bethlehem?
Ruth had a spring in her step and a fascinating Moabite accent. And it wasn't long before she caught the eye of a prosperous farmer named Boaz. He was a little long in the tooth, but he still knew a pretty girl when he saw one, and before long he took her under his wing. He helped her in the fields. He had her over for a meal, and when she asked him one day in her disarming Moabite way why he was being so nice to her, he said he'd heard how good she'd been to Naomi, who happened to be his distant cousin. And as far as he was concerned, she deserved nothing but the best.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's good luck for Ruth, right?
Yeah.
Are you suspicious of it? It's kind of like a soap opera.
Well, and you know.
And that I know that you're a fan.
That's right in my wheelhouse. I love...
Especially which one?
Oh, Young and the Restless.
Young and the Restless.
For
This
sure.
could be a scene from the Young and the Restless.
It could be. And many of my soaps
Old
are
and the Restless
are no
more.
Yeah, these days.
Because of Boaz.
Yeah. And the actual show. But that's another podcast. Or another show. So Naomi is watching all of this, and she is no fool, as Buechner says. And so she really wants to help Ruth get some security for herself in the future. And so she tells Ruth all the right ways to reel him in, is how Buechner describes it. So she gives her instructions. You know, he's working on they're harvesting, and he's sleeping on the threshing room floor. And so she says after he's had his supper and a nightcap and goes to bed, then she tells Ruth to go to the barn where he is. And I'm embarrassed to talk about some of what I learned as I was reading in the commentary.
Is this the first time you've heard that? I knew about it.
No, but it's the first time I think I read the commentary about it. Like, I know about the euphemism. She tells Ruth to uncover Boaz's feet. And I know that feet is often a euphemism in the Old Testament.
For a more personal part of the body.
Yes.
Can we say it that way?
Sure. So anyway, I would like to fast forward through this part.
We may have to change the rating for this
We
particular
might. My face got a little red
episode.
when I read it, but as I was, looking at other places, there are a lot of people who do not like that interpretation.
Oh,
yeah,
that it's not right. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That there was nothing untoward about what may or may not have happened on the threshing room floor. But at any rate, Buechner says it worked like a charm. We're going to move on to the next part. Just read it. Read what happens in the book of Ruth. And so tell us what happens next.
Ruth followed her mother-in-law's advice to the letter, and it worked like a charm. Boaz was so overwhelmed that she'd pay attention to an old crock like him when there were so many young bucks running around in tight-fitting jeans that he fell for her hook, line, and sinker, and after a few legal matters were taken care of, made her his lawful wedded wife.
I love how Buechner did this because there's this very long, kind of boring chapter where there's another relative involved, and perhaps they have to trade some land, and Ruth comes with the land, and it's convoluted and weird, and he just says, after some legal matters were taken care of.
Because it's not. Yeah. And think about how often in Scripture, especially a more narrative passage, the writer of that particular passage gets really caught up, maybe for historical reasons, in recording exactly what the problems were and that they were, and it just messes up the story.
Right.
Because it's skip those 5 verses and go on, because you want to know what happens.
Yeah.
You want to know about that. So thank you, Fredrick Buechner,
Thank you
for
very much.
taking out all of the extra details we don't need.
And so then we find out that, at the tail end of the story, that Ruth and Boaz are together, that they have a son named Obed, that Naomi lives with them and cares for this child. And Obed gave birth later in his life to a man named Jesse, and then Jesse gave birth to King David.
Wow.
And then, well, he didn't give birth,
No.
but
No.
that was his father. And
But
then
that puts them into the genealogy of Jesus.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
That really makes them who's who.
does.
For sure.
So I wanted to share another interesting picture that Orlu found for us by a Chinese artist named He Gi. It's oil and canvas, and it's a really interesting interpretation of Naomi and Ruth. You have to kind of look hard to see, I think, that this is two people embracing.
So I think it's 3 people. Don't you think up on the top right is the
Might
other
be Orpah. Yeah.
daughter-in-law walking away? I mean, she's kind of in the distance.
Yeah, that's true. What do you
I
like
see
this?
one hand. What's the basket got in it over there to the right?
Well, I think that has to do with the gleaning
Okay.
that Ruth would do.
So you
the
see,
fields.
I would assume Ruth is more the purple circle and a little more in control, and in the clinging part, I think you can see it in the movement of these lines, don't you think?
I do. I like this a lot.
I love the colors.
And this idea of clinging, of Ruth clinging to Naomi, even when she said, go do something else, I think is a nice tie-in with who you're talking about
That's right.
today.
Another person who was told not to hold on. Exactly right. So I wanted to show you some art also, thank you, Orlu, about Mary Magdalene at the tomb, which is the piece of Mary's story that Buechner really focuses on the most, and zeroes in on that story in the Gospel of John when Mary is at the tomb and has a conversation with someone she thinks is the gardener, and it turns out to be Jesus. So here is something from the Royal Collection in London, and Rembrandt, very famous painting, 1638. But look at Jesus. He's got an Easter hat on. I sort of zoomed in a little closer,
Right.
so that everybody could see. Now you can see the
There's
angel.
a feather in it.
He just looks. What? I don't know about this. Why?
Well, maybe it's very
Or
much
it
what
also-
Buechner is doing with his stories, that Rembrandt was bringing the story more into his own
time.
His own time.
Or it could be almost like, if it was black, it could be a pirate hat.
Well, okay.
All right. And so what do you think that Mary Magdalene looks kind of clearly startled? Mm-hmm. She's got her ointment there. She had hoped to anoint the body, which isn't there. Mm-hmm. She's surprised. I don't think at this point, do you think this is where Jesus says her name?
Yes.
And then she knows who he is?
Yeah, because she looks up and
She's
and
kind
sees
of
him.
not very attractive in this picture.
I just am laughing at that reclining angel in the background. That angel is
with the feet sticking
yeah.
out. Just taking it easy.
But
And
no,
look, Jesus has a shovel. No wonder she thought he was a gardener. He has a shovel. What's he doing with his shovel?
well, that's a great question.
And maybe
Renee.
that's a gardener's hat. He was in disguise. He was in disguise trying to sneak away. You didn't expect to have to answer these questions.
I did not, but that's all right.
Here's another piece of art from the same artist we just looked at
Yeah.
in that very interesting Ruth and Naomi illustration. And this is Jesus here. The title of this one he painted was "Do Not Hold On to Me," which was Jesus. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Does it look like Jesus has a shovel in that picture?
It does, and she has ointment. I mean, she has a jar of ointment. There's a lot of...
What is Jesus doing with a shovel? I don't understand. Do you think Orlu can help us understand
Maybe
it?
she can. I never read about a shovel in the Bible.
So notice that it appears that maybe Mary is about to touch his hand. She's holding one part of his cloak.
Yes.
And you can see, I think, from Jesus' expression, although Jesus looks kind of feminine in this picture to me. Do you think?
Yes, and I think
painting?
she looks a little masculine.
Now we're so confused. So I wanted, there's such controversy about Mary Magdalene. Is she a former Miss Kitty? Is she a former prostitute? I'm trying to think of the most respectable prostitute I can think of. So is that true? I just want to pause because Buechner's going to talk to us about the physicality of this scene. I just wanted to pause and see what a couple of people would say about Mary in particular and that long-standing idea that Mary was kind of the wanton woman. Mary Magdalene was the woman that every man wants, and Mary, mother of Jesus, was a representation of the perfect woman.
Right.
And so the two Marys are always dueling against each other as if those are the only two roles for women.
Right. And,
to be prostitutes or to be birth mothers.
Right. And that has played out in so many different ways and so many harmful ways for women.
Exactly.
Over the centuries.
It has led us to discount the role of Mary Magdalene. So I went to one of my sources, Feasting on the Word, and found this comment from a pastor in Massachusetts.
Okay.
That's a very respectable place.
Sure.
So let's hear what John Stendhal has to say about this.
Okay. Unlike the empty tomb stories of the other evangelists, John's account gives us just one woman, one who comes to the tomb alone. She comes out of her own desire to be where the body of Jesus is. She is bereft that he's been taken away, not just by death, but by the disappearance of his body. She grieves, she yearns, she weeps. Her words are poignant, and we can feel the hurt and long in them. They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. Try as I might, I cannot help but hear a resonance of the Magdalene's voice in Jesus Christ Superstar, that of the amazed and devoted lover of the man who has moved her so deeply. Volumes have been written on all that is problematic with that tradition of imagining Mary Magdalene, both as it has diminished her likely importance as an apostle in her own right, and as it has played out as a paradigmatic male fantasy about women. Let the teller of the tale take care.
So, when you have this kind of controversy, when you're really wondering, what is it true? What part of the Mary story is true or not? You know where I like to go?
Where?
I like to ask the Smithsonian.
Oh.
Isn't that where you always turn for religious information? But as I was looking around the internet, I just like, first of all, look at this picture. That is a hussy-looking picture of Mary, right? And the name of this painting, this is a Baroque artist, de la Tour, 1640, and the name of this picture is Magdalene with the Smoking Flame. That's the same kind of bad rep that Mary Magdalene gets all the time. She looks like she's waiting for her next customer in this painting. Artists have contributed to this.
Okay.
But will you read what the
Smithsonian
has to say?
Who was she? From the New Testament, one can conclude that Mary of Magdala, her hometown, a village on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, was a leading figure among those attracted to Jesus. When the men in that company abandoned him at the hour of mortal danger, Mary of Magdala was one of the women who stayed with him, even to the crucifixion. She was present at the tomb, the first person to whom Jesus appeared after his resurrection, and the first to preach the good news of that miracle. These are among the few specific assertions made about Mary Magdalene in the Gospel. From other texts of the early Christian era, it seems that her status as an apostle in the years after Jesus' death rivaled even that of Peter. The prominence derived from the intimacy of her relationship with Jesus, which according to some accounts had a physical aspect that included kissing. Beginning with the threads of these few statements in the earliest Christian records, dating to the 1st through 3rd centuries, an elaborate tapestry was woven, leading to a portrait of St. Mary Magdalene in which the most consequential note, that she was a repentant prostitute, is almost certainly untrue. On that false note hangs the dual use to which her legend has been put ever since, discrediting sexuality in general and disempowering women in particular.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. And I did it with the Ruth story.
How?
How embarrassed I was about that.
Oh, that's right, about the...
Yeah.
So see, isn't that interesting? So some of the story of who Mary Magdalene is all post first century. It, just began to be an interesting way to tell the story. Maybe there was some jealousy because of her role as an apostle.
Right.
And so criticizing her in some way began to be a practice.
And that's the way men have treated women. I mean, that's the way to hurt a woman, is to accuse her of sexual indiscretion.
So I could not get to Buechner without having a shout out for who Mary really was, how important she was to the movement, and that we pretty much know she wasn't a former prostitute.
Right.
That she was a leader. All right.
Take that, artists.
Take that. Now, so you do notice, even in this next picture from Antwerp, 1601, you notice the strength of Jesus, I think, in these paintings of Jesus encountering Mary, his strength, and her understanding her role. Mm-hmm. But she was an apostle, and she was the first one to be able to say, he is alive. Mm-hmm. So listen to would you read for us what Buechner says? I love the way he tells his story. We're going to listen to one part of it and talk about it, and then I'll tell you when to continue.
All right. Just then another person came up to Mary and asked why she was crying. What was she doing there? She decided it must be somebody in charge, like the gardener maybe. And she said if he was the one who had moved the body somewhere else, would he please tell her where it was so she could go there? Keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Instead of answering her, he spoke her name, Mary. And then she recognized who he was. And though from that instant forward the whole course of human history was changed in so many profound and complex ways that it's impossible to imagine how it would have been different otherwise, for Mary Magdalene, the only thing that had changed was her old friend and teacher and strong right arm was alive again.
He is the master of long sentences. Have you noticed that as we're doing the reading?
Yeah.
But you feel, I think, in Buechner's long sentences, you feel movement. You feel how now this turns from Mary's grief because the body is gone, and the last thing she hoped to do was prepare the body, and now she can't even do that.
Right.
So you feel the movement, I think, in the way, as a storyteller, Buechner kind of propels us all forward. Would you read that long sentence one more time?
Sure. Instead of answering her, he spoke her name, Mary. And then she recognized who he was. And though from that instant forward the whole course of human history was changed in so many profound and complex ways that it's impossible to imagine how it would have been different otherwise, for Mary Magdalene the only thing that had changed was her old friend and teacher and strong right arm was alive again. You can't do it in one breath.
No, but I just love, because you feel this from sadness to joy. Don't you feel that in the way he tells the story?
And how he moves us from the course of human history to this moment in her life. A very particular, yes. Mm-hmm. We can't even say all of the ways that Jesus' resurrection has changed the course. But for Mary, in that moment,
he was gone and now he's back. And he's her friend and he's her teacher. What do you think about, anything else you want to say about that before we read a little bit more?
I can't tell from this picture that I have. Is Jesus' left hand resting on something? Is that another shovel, or is it just a stick?
If that's another shovel, I don't know what that is.
But there's something in his hand.
Yes, yes, he's got something in his hand. So the idea that she was talking to the gardener, you think it's a shovel? That's perpetuating her confusion.
The name of this lesson is Jesus and the Shovel.
Now, in this next, you're going to read a little bit more from Buechner, and Jesus doesn't have a shovel in this picture.
Thank goodness. All right.
Here's how it ends.
Rabboni, she shouted, and was about to throw her arms around him for sheer joy and astonishment when he stopped her. Touch me not, he said. Don't hold on to me. Thus making her not only the first person in the world to have her heart stop beating for a second to find him alive again when she thought he was dead as a doornail, but the first person also to have her heart break a little to realize that he couldn't be touched anymore. Wasn't there any more as a hand to hold on to when the going got tough, a shoulder to weep on, because the life in him was no longer a life she could know by touching it, with her here and him there, but a life she could know only by living it with her here. Old tart and retread. Old broken heart and last, best friend, and with him here too, alive inside her life, to raise her up also out of the wreckage of all that was wrecked in her and dead. In the meanwhile, he had so much to do and far to go, he said, and so did she. And the first thing she did was go back to the disciples to report. I have seen the Lord, she said, and whatever dark doubts they might have had on the subject earlier, one look at her face was enough to melt them all away like morning mist.
I just think that is wonderful. And how he distinguished, he helped me understand, okay, now, and as if Mary understood too, this is a different relationship. Not that I think she was about to give him a big smooch or anything, but this relationship based on him alive in her life and how she would demonstrate. It's like there was some wisdom there.
Yes. Is he playing into this idea
well,
of her,
he calls
though,
her
when
an
he calls her
old tart.
tart and retread? I don't like that.
No, he was just throwing in some adjectives there. Do you know, is there some professional aspect to being an old tart? I don't know.
I don't know.
Is a tart another word for a woman of the evening?
Is it?
Is
Maybe
it?
so. I don't know.
I don't know. He wasn't making that important, but
it does stand out.
She can't escape that.
Right.
Our conversations about her are forever distracted by some information that got added to spice up a story, but it wasn't true.
Right. So we can do our part to...
That's right. She's not an old tart.
To tell her story.
She's not a retread. Look how beautiful she
light.
is in all of these pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what my lingering thought will be from our episode today?
The shovel.
Why does Jesus have a shovel in all these paintings? Oh, I love the writing of Fredrick Buechner. I think he was these two stories go together nicely, don't they?
Mm-hmm. And that was not by design. Well, maybe there was a grander design, but since they came from the Sunday school class.
That's right.
They just called out who they wanted to hear about.
Who would you like us to talk about next?
And see how the Holy Spirit
That's right.
brought us to stories that worked so well together.
I think we have recommended lots of books on All Church Sunday School, but this is a really good book.
Well, and this is one you can browse. You don't have to. It probably wouldn't even be good to read it front to back.
You could almost treat it like a bit of a devotional book, couldn't you? And if you weren't familiar with some of these characters, the scripture location for their stories, Buechner has included it at the end of each one, so you could do a little Bible study. Might be a good thing for the summertime.
Yeah.
If you had a little extra time.
Great. Even Jesus, his entry on Jesus is about 3 pages.
Not the
Nobody
same
does
kind of
succinct.
heavy duty.
Nobody does succinct like Fredrick Buechner.
That's right.
So
And long sentences.
yeah, but he does succinct with long.
But he covers
sentences.
a lot of ground in that long sentence.
Well, we like to hear from people,
That's right.
so we would
Even your recommendations of
yeah.
who you might like to hear. Fredrick Buechner hasn't covered everyone, but he's covered 125 people in Scripture, so he's probably got most of the
That's a
heavy
lot of the
hitters.
heavy hitters and some unexpected
obscure.
folks. So I haven't received any mail yet.
Oh, you know what? I discovered that you're not hooked up to the email address, so
Oh.
I'm taking care of that today.
Okay.
So anyone who sends us a note, you will see it.
Yay.
Shannon Moore. Rest assured.
ACSS,
That's right.
All Church Sunday School at UCCFTW.com.
That's it.
I bet it's appearing right underneath me right now.
In
right underneath my
some
face.
magical way.
In a magical way.
And there's a picture of a shovel.
Austin's making notes. Okay, I got to write it here. I got to put a shovel in. Well, thanks for a great conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed hearing about these two interesting women. Three interesting women.
That's right.
4 if we count Orpah, and 5 if we count Oprah Winfrey.
Wow.
Lots of interesting women.
Lots
today.
of interesting women on All Church Sunday School.
I wonder if Oprah watches.
I don't think she has time for that, Shannon.
Oh.
She's really busy.
I might drop her a note. So, we'll see you next time. Have a great week.